I'm Little Quick from Cloud Gaming Battle with an early look at GeForce NOW's new 4080 hardware. We're trying it out with Total War Warhammer 3, mostly because I want to play a game that's going to push these cards to the limit. As much as I like, say, Stardew Valley, I don't think it's going to be a challenge for NVIDIA's hardware, even in stunning 4K. We're going to do a number of tests today to get some comparisons both at standard HD and 4K. To do this, I've played some Total War Warhammer 3 on GeForce NOW's Priority tier, the 3080 tier, and the Early Access version of Ultimate, featuring the GeForce RTX 4080. Let's get this out of the way first. Controls were smooth as always. Whether I play in 4K or 1080, mouse controls smooth, the gameplay is clean on all tiers. The GeForce NOW app delivers every time if your latency is good. Total War isn't really a game where you need FPS quality timing. It plays really well on cloud services, even those without the precision that NVIDIA offers. But let's get into the meat of the issue. How well does the hardware stack up against what we've already seen? Let's push all the settings to Ultra across the board and see the actual change in power from tier to tier in 1080. Something else I'd like to mention is that in our tests, there's a negligible difference between the quality of the Priority and Free tiers of GeForce NOW. The subscription you pay for mainly allows you to skip the free-to-play queue and increases your playtime caps. If you're looking for stats on the Free tier, it's going to be roughly the same as Priority. Total War fans also know that load times can be a problem. The load times for Priority are much slower than for the 3080 or Ultimate tiers. A 4080 rig from the Ultimate tier seems to have a bit more loading speed than their 3080 counterpart, but it's not nearly as noticeable as the jump from a basic rig to the elite levels. Now, starting with the battle benchmarks in 1080p, Priority tier is loading up in 2 minutes and 18 seconds. The 3080 machine is doing it in 30 seconds, and the 4080 Ultimate in 27. The upgraded machine is cutting out almost 80% of your load time. You can see that the benchmark is performing quite well on all tiers. Even Priority is keeping the average at 63, dipping as low as 45. This benchmark is capping its FPS at 120, which means both the 3080 and the 4080 can hit it at times. The 3080 is averaging 106 frames per second, but bottoming out at about 78. The 4080's mean is 116 as it hugs that 120 FPS cap most of the way. It never drops below 98. There's a significant power increase in the 4080. Though neither rig ever gets close to dropping under 60. Now, as crazy as these battles look, Total War players know that the campaign map has its own quirks and stresses that it puts on your GPU. Loading a new campaign is painful on Priority, clocking in at 7 minutes and 11 seconds. The Elite tiers fare much better, loading in at about a minute, with the 3080 doing 68 seconds and the 4080 clocking in at 58. Let's talk Immortal Empire's frames per second in 1080p. In the Priority tier, we have an average of 49 FPS, dipping down to 28. It's playable, but not exceptional. For the 3080, we're averaging a much more solid 74, dipping just under 60 frames per second at the most stressful moments. Finally, the 4080 handles the campaign map a bit better than its last-gen counterpart, holding an average of 88, the lowest 62. The 4080 is better here, but not to a game-changing degree. Now, we can skip the in-depth loading time discussion for this 4K resolution. They're roughly the same. The assets and textures that need to be brought to bear are the same whether you're doing 1080, 1440, or 4K. If you forgot, battle loads at around 30 seconds and the campaign map in about a minute. Now, what I didn't know before is that the 4K battle benchmarks are FPS capped at 60 on GeForce NOW. The 3080 never got that high, so we never found the cap. The 4080 not only reaches 60, but it holds it the entire time, absolutely annihilating the benchmark with a perfect 60 across the board. Now, I've seen some others talking online that they don't have capped FPS in their benchmark on their home PCs, so if anyone's aware of a setting or quirk to enable higher than 60 FPS on 4K, drop a line in the comments. Our internet is decent and my monitor is 144 Hz, so it's not a hardware issue as far as I can tell. Now let's check the Immortal Empire's campaign map and see if the 4080 can keep up that perfect score. The FPS is again capped at 60 for this demonstration. The 3080 is holding on, averaging 47 FPS and never dropping below 39, but it strays far from that golden goal of 60 frames. The 4080 again outpaces its last generation counterpart, keeping an average of 59 FPS, but not quite able to keep that 60 FPS at all times. The lowest it hits is 54, which is still higher than the 3080's average, and though the 4080 doesn't achieve perfection, it does a killer job on the demanding ultra visuals in 4K. Now, we can draw some conclusions based on our tests. Priority and Free tiers are going to make you wait 4 to 5 times as long on your loading screens compared to the ultimate power of the 3080 and the 4080 machines. This is doubly an issue on that Free tier, because your playtime is so limited before you're going to get kicked off. The hardware upgrades that NVIDIA is so keen on showing is not all smoke and mirrors. We've got solid power increases from the 3080 to the 4080 hardware. The 20 to 25% boost in FPS is probably not going to set the world on fire if you're playing in 1080. Both the 3080 and 4080 cards are consistently higher than 60 frames per second. However, if you play in 4K, that jump from the 3080 to the 4080 is way more noticeable. It's the difference between struggling back and forth between 35 and 60 frames on the 3080 and keeping a staunch line of 60 FPS at all times on the newest 4000 series hardware. In short, if you run Total War in 1080, you're going to like the new generation of NVIDIA hardware, and if you run it in 4K, you're going to love it. 1440 players are also going to get a lot out of these upgrades. I made sure to play some Immortal Empires and have a battle on each tier in resolution. The data is fairly consistent with the benchmark tests. If you're looking for a more in-depth review on how Total War Warhammer 3 plays on GeForce NOW, including the loading and multiplayer quirks, be sure to check out the All Tiers review where I talk about more than just raw computing power. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Subscribe to catch more up-to-date cloud gaming news and reviews. Join our Patreon or become a channel member if you want to go the extra distance to support our work. Keep it tuned right here to the only place you can do battle in gaming heaven, Cloud Gaming Battle. I'm a little quick. I'm glad I'm finally done syncing up all these benchmarks. I'll see you on the battlefield.